point. If we want to solve the problem that we're facing now, there's only one way to go, and that is economic growth. We need to create jobs. If we have to create jobs, then we must evaluate the ways that we're not creating jobs today. The two greatest threats to job creation.
The gentleman will suspend temporarily. The chair will receive a message.
Mr. Speaker, a message from the Senate.
Mr. Speaker, I have been
Madam Secretary.
directed by the Senate to inform the House that the Senate has passed without amendment H.R. 662, cited as the Surface Transportation Extension Act of 2011.
Gentleman from New Mexico may proceed.
We resume our discussion talking about how we would create these two numbers to come together. That would be a balanced budget. And again, I would repeat that it is very difficult for us to cut enough spending to reach balance, that my idea is that we must increase the number of jobs. As we bring people into the workforce, we're simultaneously accomplishing two things. We're causing this number to go up as people pay taxes that were previously unemployed, but then we're also bringing people off of unemployment, welfare, and government assistance, and so we're lowering this number toward this one as we increase that one. The actuarial tables show us that at about 3.5% rate of growth, that we can actually begin to move towards balance. These long-term numbers begin to clear up significantly just by creating jobs in the growth rate of about 3.5%. Well, then the next question would be, can we create jobs in 3.5%? Well, that's exactly what we've averaged for over 70 years. It's well established that we can do it. Right now, our economic growth is in the 1% to 2% range, so it means that we almost have to double our rate of growth, and that would be possible if we did two basic things. Number one, if we lowered taxes, and tax breaks create jobs, tax decreases create jobs, tax increases kill jobs, and so then the second aspect of creating jobs would be to lower the regulations. Now, I have many people that react in horror, and when I say we should lower regulations, they immediately claim you would go to zero regulation. I don't mean that at all. I simply mean that we are regulating our jobs out of existence. Companies are finding it easier to go to another country and operate rather than operate here. The regulations are so extreme. One way that we're regulating companies out of existence is through our lending right now. We passed the Dodd-Frank bill, which puts new requirements on banks, and so the bankers in my district in southern New Mexico have been calling recently saying that we used to, under the previous accounting methods and the previous reporting methods, would simply get written up if we made a mistake on a loan package. Today, we're told that we could get a $50,000 fine. So they then are skeptical and reticent to lend money to small businesses and to people buying homes because they stand to lose more on the loan by one typographical error, one exception than they can make. And so that then has the formal process that a young family, a young couple in Socorro, New Mexico, have recently graduated from New Mexico Tech in that area. They both are employed, both have degrees, both have good-paying jobs, and yet the bank says, well, you know, we just don't want to lend money because it might turn out to be a bad loan, and we could lose our bank over one bad loan, or we could get a $50,000 penalty over a mistake in the loan application. It's just too tough. That means the regulations have been so high that the businesses are saying, well, we would rather stay on the sidelines, which is what's happening nationwide. So we're being told that if the banks would simply loan money, that everything would be fixed, and it's a lot true. Construction would start back, houses would start back, real estate agents would start back. Everyone would start, except it is regulated down into a low, just stagnant position because of these regulations that are in many people's eyes too high. Another way that we regulate jobs out of existence is environmental concerns. We are saying to ourselves that we should protect species at all costs, that is, even the human cost, and I'm saying that that's too extreme. I would not let species go extinct, but I would say that we should create jobs and protect the species at the same time. So in order to cure this problem, to raise this 2.2 toward the 3.5 simultaneously, lowering the 3.5 towards 2.2, I've actually put 3 bills in so that we can have test cases of this discussion for America. The first one would be that, yes, we should keep the spotted owl alive, but we should not kill every timber job in America, which is basically what happened. In New Mexico, we used to have 20,000 jobs in timber, and today we have more or less none. Sometimes one guy says, I got 8 people, and sometimes he said, well, I laid them off this week, and so we're up and down. The meaning of all that is that we've lowered, because of the spotted owl, from about 20,000 jobs basically to 0 in New Mexico, and nationwide. That's caused this number to get smaller as people go on welfare, and it's caused this number to get bigger. And as people get less paying jobs, then that means this number gets smaller because they don't pay as much in taxes, they don't have as much to spend, so retail merchants don't make as much, and then they pay less in taxes. Meanwhile, more families are struggling. They get some sort of aid even when they're working, and the 3.5 number gets larger as we get jobs that pay less. Again, my bill simply says, let's have a discussion as Americans. Let's discuss whether or not we have to make the species the last determinant of everything in the forest, or if we can't keep the spotted owl alive in sanctuaries, 1,000 acres here, 1,000 acres there, and go back to cutting in the forest. Now then, the first thing that some alarmists will do is say, well, you're going to clear-cut the forest. We shouldn't clear-cut the forest. We don't need to do that. We don't need to do that. And I'm saying, no, we don't have to clear-cut the forest. Land management companies commonly cut they have a balanced thinning program. They go through, cut some trees of all sizes, and they're constantly working their way through their acreage so that good small companies exist on very small acreages. We've got 225 million acres of forest land in this country, and yet it is being logged at almost 0 rates. We've got forest in New Mexico, 3 million acres in one, 2 million acres in another. We've got very large forests, and yet they haven't had significant 1,000-acre timber sales in forever, and that's maybe in 20 years since they've had significant timber sales, and even then they're restricted from harvesting the large diameter trees that are economically profitable. And so we've driven out most of the timber mills. We've driven out most of those people who would make a living doing that, all in the name of the environment. And all of us would want the environment clean. We would like the species to not be extinct. But I do not think that we have to completely ignore the job situation at hand. The second bill we put in was the 27,000 farmers in the San Joaquin Valley. They were put out of work about 2 years ago by a silvery minnow. A judge said that all the water in the river has to stay there and cannot be used for agriculture. So those 27,000 people who used to be paying income tax here moved as a cost to the government to the 3.5. They're on welfare, unemployment, and so our revenues go down, our expenses go up, and that's a toxic case for a government, for a business, or for a family. And yet we're encouraging it through our policies. So my bill, again, is very simple. Keep the 2-inch minnow alive in holding ponds, put them in the river in the millions when we need them, but in the meantime, let's use that water for the irrigation in the San Joaquin Valley. The worst thing about shutting that farmland down in the San Joaquin Valley is that area used to they produced most of the vegetables for this country. Now then, with them idle, we are importing vegetables from Central and South America, and they spray pesticides that we're not allowed to. So we hurt our revenues, we accelerated the cost of government, and we got an unsafe food supply all at the same time. It does not have to be that way. We can accomplish both jobs and the species. The last bill that we introduced was offshore. Every one of us saw the BP situation. Again, I believe that BP should be accountable. I understand the process that they went through. They made some bad decisions. They're being held accountable. They're actually paying 100% of the cost, and that is not the question. The question is whether the President should have ordered for the 100,000-plus jobs to be killed. You see right now the governor of Louisiana, you see the people in Louisiana really suffering because those rigs that used to be offshore working, thousands of people out there working every day at very high-paying salaries now are drawing unemployment. So we, again, lowered our 2.2 figure down lower. We increased the 3.5, so we made our budget situation much worse by policies that threaten or stop job growth. Back on taxes, again, we had mentioned that that's one way that companies choose to live and operate elsewhere. Now, people say, well, why do taxes create jobs more slowly? Mr. Sweat, who is in the 2nd District of New Mexico in Artesia, said it best. He said, for me to create one job takes $340,000. He said, that's what a bulldozer costs, and I run bulldozers. He said, so when the government taxes my money away from me, it takes me longer to get my $340,000. He said, by the way, I got to buy a $60,000 pickup because they won't let me drive the bulldozer to work down through the main streets of Artesia, and so we have to have a pickup and a truck. So he said it takes a little bit more than $340,000 to create a job, but every time the government taxes me more, it takes longer to get the $340,000 in the bank. That's the reason that under higher and higher tax rates, our economy stagnates and jobs are not produced as quickly, because we're taking that money away from businesses who would create it and putting it into the government that simply then spends it here in this 3.5 without really making more jobs. So we are faced with a question in the country: are we caring about the long-time survival of our economy, or are we going to continue down the same path? Now, that's the greatest discussion that we should be having. That's the discussion they're having right now in Wisconsin. In Wisconsin, basically, the union employees are saying we want more pay, and we want more benefits, that is, more retirement. Right now, basically, across the country, our union employees, and I think they should get every penny that they're wanting and that they are deserving, but we have to understand that our union employees working for the government are making basically twice what our people in the private sector are making. So we down here are paying taxes in order for people that are costing in the government to make twice what we are. And they're asking for more, and meaning that we should charge the private sector workers more taxes in order to pay higher salaries. But then the real rub comes in on the retirements. Many of our government employees have an option to retire at 20 years, and many of those can retire at 75% of their pay. If you're making $40,000 a year, then you can retire at $30,000 a year. I have a document in my office that has New Mexico retirees' salaries, and this is from 10 years ago when I was in the state legislature. And the highest paid worker in our retired system in New Mexico, contrast with about 30. Average New Mexican is working 40 hours a week. And what it's caused is this imbalance here, this cost that is doubling above what we can take in revenues. And so the discussion going on in Wisconsin is the same discussion that we should be having here on the floor of the House, and it's the same discussion that we should be having in every state capital, because almost every state, I think 48 of the 50, are now running in deficit conditions because the cost of government, the cost of their employees, the cost of education has risen so dramatically. And in the private sector, we're sitting out here basically with flat wages, maybe declining wages. And so our discussions nationwide have to be, how do we cure the problem? Now, if we begin to get our tax policy and our regulatory policy in control, I think that the manufacturing jobs would come back. So it's not just that we want jobs, McDonald's or wherever, those would create service-level jobs, but we're interested in careers, not just jobs. We're interested in being able to plan for your future, in being able to pay for college for your kids, or plan for your own retirement. Those are the careers that we're wanting to draw back, and those come from the good manufacturing jobs which left in droves during the last 30 or 40 years as we increased regulation and as we increased taxation. Those jobs would come flooding back to us if we simply lowered the taxes, and you heard President Obama say that in the State of the Union message, that we now have one of the 2 highest corporate tax rates in the world. A couple of days after his speech, Japan actually lowered that tax rate and their tax rate, leaving us at the top level. And so the President recognizes that we make ourselves uncompetitive with our tax rate, and we should do something about it. He's exactly right. We should cut taxes. And yet when you bring that up on the floor of the House, you have one half of the body that grabs their chest and falls backward, pulling the flag across their face and saying we can't do that because Old Glory might just wither away. And the other side says it's the only way to economic growth. If we're going to fix this imbalance of spending and revenue, we absolutely have to have growth, and job creation should be the primary focus of this Congress. But unless we focus on the taxes and on the regulation, we cannot cure the job problem in the country. A few years ago, Ireland was looking at itself and said, you know, Ireland is a pretty smart country. We're smart people. We're hard-working people. We're struggling under a bad economy. What can we do to make it better? So they thought a lot about it. They had studies, and they decided that they should lower their corporate tax rate. So they lowered their corporate tax rate. It was equal to ours at that point, about 36%. They lowered it down to 12%, and companies began to flock into Ireland because the tax rate was changed from 36 down to 12%. That's what lowering the tax rate does, is it draws the great jobs to you, the manufacturing jobs. Well, in the intervening years, now Ireland began to do what we did. They began to say, well, with all this money, we're awash in money, with the revenues here were exceeding the outflows. They began to say, well, we're going to spend more, and so they began to develop programs of giveaway, and they began to raise taxes. Now, my brother-in-law he works for Hughes Tool and just got back from Ireland. They dismantled their last plant in Ireland that they had taken over when they were given the lower taxes. Because of the higher tax rates now, they're now evacuating out of Ireland. So Ireland is faced with this exact same problem, and Ireland is at the point of economic collapse, along with Greece, along with Spain, along with other countries in Europe, because all of us have been living beyond our means. Each country in the world right now is faced with its own set of problems that basically originate that we're spending more than we're bringing in. We're spending more for government than what the private sector can make, and we all face the same catastrophe that the Soviet Union faced, that their economy is simply going to implode. Now, I, for one, do not want to be on the watch and not be saying something as we're going down the track, and so I give this presentation everywhere we go. And the people who are saying we absolutely have to have more government spending, I simply say, show me how it's going to work. The way we've been making this work is that we've been printing money. As we print money, we take money away from you because printing money makes the dollars in your pocket worth less. And so as your money in your pocket is worth less, then the prices go up. So we're seeing gasoline prices now escalate to $4, and some people are saying it's the evil oil companies. Well, the truth is that your dollar is worth less. If it were only oil going up, then you could say, yeah, the oil companies are taking more profit. But your vegetables are going up. Your gold is going up. Silver is going up. Big metals are going up. In the oil field in southeast New Mexico, we use a lot of drill pipe, and I got word last week when I was traveling around that the people who own drill pipe to sell it right now don't want to sell it. They would rather have their pipe than dollars because they see that we've printed this $2.6 trillion. They see their dollars worth less. They see the prices escalating, so they simply have shut off selling the drill pipe. It's worth more than the cash that they could get for it. And that's going to be another sign that our economy has really begun to struggle under the inflation as we see shortages of vegetables, shortages of anything. Now, the price of silver and the gold have been escalating. The price of silver a week ago Friday went up 10% on one day. Then 2 or 3 days later, it went up another 8 or 9%. It's not that we were using that much more silver 2 or 3 days later. It's that people were saying, ooh, I would rather hold silver than those dollars, and they've been flooding across from dollars to silver, and you're seeing the price. You're seeing that people are choosing that this object of silver that maybe is very difficult to store, very difficult to handle, is actually more valuable to them than holding the cash in the bank. This is because we're living like that. So either we begin to discipline ourselves both nationally and as individuals, because we individually have been running up debt that is sort of the equivalent of this. Either we begin to discipline, or the ultimate consequences is within 25 years we're going to see catastrophic economic situations arise for our families. I do not think that any of us want that. I think that the economic explanations of exactly why we're having the difficulties in our economy that we're having are very simple. They're very transparent. We're spending $3.5 trillion every year, and we're bringing in $2.2 trillion. That number is actually going to escalate next year, so that this deficit, instead of being $1.3 trillion in the next year, according to the President's budget, is going to be $1.6 trillion. That 1.6 trillion at the end of the year will be added to the 15 trillion of debt, so that at the end of the year we'll owe 16.5 trillion. The 202 trillion stays out here as obligations that are currently due because retirees are flooding into the market. The baby boomers are moving into retirement in record numbers now, and that's going to continue for another 15 or 20 years. We have serious problems facing us, but the problems are fairly easily solved if we simply lower the tax rates, especially if we lower them on the job producers, and secondly, if we get our regulations in control. Not to no regulations, but to simply find a balance point that will allow us to protect the worker, protect the environment, protect the species, while at the same time creating jobs. Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time, and I thank the members.
Gentleman yields back.
Mr. Speaker, I would now move that the House do now adjourn.
Question is on the motion to adjourn. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the motion is adopted. Accordingly, the House stands adjourned until 2 p.m. tomorrow.
Well, the House has completed legislative work for the week. They meet tomorrow for a pro forma session for filing bills and possible speeches. Before leaving today, though, members voted to change the health care law, removing a